Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the best mutants in the game, primarily the 7-star mutants, even though I will be giving shout out to the best 6-star mutants that would make top 10 list were they to exist as 7 stars. Now the reason why we are excluding 6 stars from this list is largely because the game is moving forward, and let's face it, when it comes to the most sought after champions, the champions that do compete for your most valuable resources, which currently are 7-star rank up materials, 7-star awakening gems, and 7-star 6 stones, that is what kind of people are truly after. Obviously, 6-star ascended champions are still perfectly viable in just about everywhere in the game, including Necropolis, including Battlegrounds, but we are seeing significantly less and less of them. That said, as 7-star rank 4s are entering the game and have entered the game already, soon are to become much more viable. I do expect 6 stars to basically, be the new 5 stars. Not just quite yet, but it's coming, Regardless of how good Quake is, she doesn't exist as a 6 or 7 star, so, she doesn't get any attention from anyone really, because she's just not quite strong enough. All of that on top of the fact that these lists reflect the current game relevance and trends with a mixture of my own opinions. Effectively, these are the meta champions, the champions that you see people use when losing matters, when it is competitive situations in PvP, be that Alliance War, be that Battlegrounds, when it is challenge mode, so on and so forth. These are the champions that perform best when it matters the most, in my opinion, obviously, because I do not have hard data to back any of this up, so you are perfectly free to make your own lists according to your own personal preferences as well. Now, all the mandatory disclaimers out of the way, let's take a look at the old Mutant top 10. And I'll admit, I made a mistake in this one. Onslaught was still better than Mr. Sinister. It might have been a bit of a Sinister overhype moment, but I think Sinister still has aged great. That said, we had Mr. Sinister, Onslaught, Domino in spot number 3, Bishop in spot number 4, AA spot number 5. Again, AA has, kind of disappeared from the game a lot. Then we have Sunspot, Havoc, Omega Red completely has disappeared, Dust, and Negasonic Teenage Warhead. A lot of these rankings have changed places. Some champions have dropped, some have climbed up, some new additions there as well. So we have a lot to discuss. Let's get started, shall we? So this is the Mutant class as it stands currently. Before I get any further, I do want to give out some honorable shoutouts. We're going to start with a few 7-star champions that just didn't make the list. Number 1 is Storm. I think Storm's an awesome offensive champion. In situation, she's absolutely crazy. I don't think she is quite at the top 10 level in overall value provided, but if it was purely offensive impact on the game, I think she would make Mutant top 10. She does nuke very well and can ramp up to insane levels in a long form content as well, and under specific conditions her damage output can go bonkers. On top of Storm, obviously we do have Storm Pyramid X, which I do think is lesser at this point. She is better defensively, but she's definitely kind of worse offensively in my opinion, but still a very, very solid champion, and there's no wonder people like her. Additionally to it all, we do need to discuss the Gentle Boy, where he is looking like an absolute beast. He's obviously not released in the game yet, so I will not be including him in the rankings, but he is kind of poised to definitely make an appearance in top 10 based on the initial impressions. Obviously all that can change. He might be a complete flop and his numbers might be bad, who knows, but as it is looking right now, I do think he will be in that Mutant top 10 within 6 months' time when we redo these lists. And then we obviously do have the mandatory shoutouts too. Number 1, Archangel, who would easily make this top 10 if he existed as 7-star, in my opinion. Additionally, we also have APOC, which has its issues with his abilities. I actually kind of wish Kabam would just add one teeny tiny bit of a line for him where he starts with 2 extra genetic code in Battlegrounds, and I think he would be dominating yet again. But even if he was released as 7-star right now, I do suspect he would gain quite a bit of popularity. On top of that, we do have, where's that little kitty pride? One of her downfalls overall was the release of 7 stars, how challenger rating affected how frequently she crits. And in general, I do think she's still obviously very, very capable champion that, you should have access to should the need arises. You can do a lot with her. I have never been the biggest fan of Kitty Pryde, but it is unquestionable that, use of Kitty Pryde has dropped dramatically. Dramatically or drastically. That's what happens when you record these late. But yeah, if we got her as a 7-star, I bet she would become a lot more popular quite quickly. Another champion is Toad. I do think Toad has a lot of potential to make even bigger impact if he comes out as a 7-star. As a 6-star, he is still being actually quite useful in places as well. But yeah, give us a Toad, pretty please. And the last one would also be Magneto, the red one. He was kind of getting phased out, and in general, his playstyle might also, similar to APOC, not be the most suited for Battlegrounds specifically. But I do think he still packs a ton of potential and is one of those champions that is very, very good to have at your disposal for when the need arises in challenge mode content or story quests and so on and so forth. Having him as 7-star would be quite awesome too. Right. All of that said, let's move on to top 10. And I'm kind of cheating here. A bit. I do have one split position. And before I move any further, there's another thing that I wanted to kind of discuss with you guys, because Mutant class was extremely hard to rank. I felt somewhat confident of top 3 spots. Definitely top 2. And then I think spots number 4 till 11 till 12 are borderline interchangeable. They really, really are. It all depends on, metas and preferences and how you view the game, so on and so forth. Because that is, I think, the one thing that kind of is currently stopping Mutant class from being one of the top classes in the game, which are inevitably Science and Mystic at the moment. And that is the fact that they do have 2 powerhouse champions, and then they have like 10 very good champions. In fact, that's kind of reflected in my own account as well, where I eventually ended up just ranking up a ton of mutants, and I still want to rank up more mutants, which I find good and great and valuable, but almost ridiculously equally so. So I'm being a bit indecisive as well. But eventually I'll get them all, right? At the very least, rank 3. And that is immediate kind of disclaimer here. If you see a champion at spot number 6 and you think it's too high, you can feel absolutely free to slide them down to spot number 9. I just think that spots number 4 to 10, 12 are ridiculously close together. And on top of it all, Mutant class has very recently got an additional shake-up type of situation with several champion releases as well, which we're going to be discussing here. And I'm kind of afraid to bite in the hype too much. So we can start with split spot number 10. And number 1, that's going to be Weapon X. I do think Weapon X is very solid. He has lost just about all of his defensive value. Like 80% of his defensive value has gone away. Because people have gotten used to him, the way you counter him, play him, when he's going to go unstoppable, when he's going to be unblockable. It is ridiculously easy to intercept him typically or bait out heavy attacks when he's in his berserk form, thus making fights quite fast-paced. There is, wide variety of ways around his regeneration. Worst case, you kind of have to wait it out, which is not ideal for Battleground setting, but it's perfectly fine just about anywhere else. Best case scenario, you have access to heal block, or you just do a lot of dot damage, or you do a lot of burst damage. So yeah, or you have access to poisons, which does mitigate his regen as well. So I do think defensively he doesn't pose that much of a threat. He has, however, gotten increasing fan base and increasing use offensively, him being quite a nuky champion and people kind of utilizing his YOLO playstyle where you get hit on purpose, get those furies and start nuking champions and then regen just about all your health back. And on top of the relic support that increases his regeneration rate, That is a very, very effective strategy. A couple of metas back, he was, borderline the best bullseye counter as well. So he might again play somewhat higher. His exclusivity might be the one thing stopping him from like broader mainstream success, because in a lot of these matchups you do want him, as highly ranked as possible for you to be able to nuke champions fast enough before you exit the berserk mode and lose your damage. But overall, he's definitely very powerful. He's one of the champions I have been eyeing for a rank 3 slot as well. And the next spot, I'm going to give it to Dazzler. And the entire reason for this is because she's brand new in the game. There has only ever been one meta where we have a ton of nuke champions, and we haven't had proper amount of time to kind of digest her impact on the game. I do think she's very capable. I do think that we're going to see more of her. I do entirely believe that we will place her higher. However, all of that at the moment, or much of that, is purely theoretical. I do think that she also has a very solid chance of being overshadowed by Gentle and a couple of other champions that have, gained their popularity recently. So I'm not entirely sure exactly where she's going to land and what's going to happen with her. But so far she looks like a very good addition to the Mutant class. On paper. Definitely. What remains to be seen, how big of an impact she will have in reality. And that is something that I want people to take in consideration here absolutely as well. I do personally think within 6 months' time, she has a very good chance in placing higher. I do think, arguably we could put her higher right now. The fact of the matter is that every champion above her on this list, I think, has done more for those top spots so far. It doesn't mean it's going to change, but Dazzler is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. Moving on, spot number 9 is Deadpool X-Force. And a lot of people are going to scream that that is criminally low as well. And I kind of agree, but it's a very similar place with Dazzler. So far, when it comes to Deadpool used in the metagame, we have seen him in one meta where he's ridiculously overpowered alongside Mr. Sinister, alongside Kate Bishop, alongside Kushala, because that power shield absolutely supercharged his damage. Just no questions asked. It really, really does. I want to see how well he's going to do when you actually have to go the level 2, level 1 rotation just about all the time, instead of being able to nuke champions with a single level 1. I still think he's going to be great. I still think he has a solid chance of making top 3, top 5. I do believe all those things. But again, there's just no concrete proof and evidence for that. Love his buff. I love what he's doing there. But again, we haven't had any real sample size and time with the champion. That is why I'm being cautious. I wasn't cautious to a point where I excluded him and Dazzler, because I do think they deserve to be here. I do think they will justify, people's hype and expectations. I can see definitely that for both of these champions. I do, however, want to actually see that before I rank them out above champions that have been there, putting in work, nuking things, or standing on defense and, getting the dubs and doing the work. At the moment, though, the hype around Deadpool X-Force is quite crazy, to a point where just about everybody's worried that he's going to get nerfed. Apparently, there are rumors going around about that as well. Now, I have heard conflicting accounts. I have heard that, people on the inside working for Kabam have mentioned something that he's likely going to get balanced, as well as equally I have heard that that is nonsense. So I personally don't think he will get changed, because I don't think he's the most, busted enough. If Serpent is perfectly balanced, then Deadpool X-Force absolutely is as well. I'll put it like that. So hopefully he remains unchanged, and hopefully he, justifies all the hype that we place on him. Again, another champion that I would undoubtedly end up placing higher had he had more time in the game, but I absolutely do believe in his value. I just want to avoid overhyping things and kind of taking it with a cautious dose of, skepticism. But I love the guy, for sure. He's a great buff. Let's move on. We have Bishop. And Bishop used to be in spot number 4 because we used to see a lot more of him. Now, again, he's currently absolutely popping off, right, in the power shield meta. As a defender, as an attacker. The reason why he's popping off as a defender as well is because of the Matador node. If you want to gain power against him quickly, you have to bait level 1s. If you bait level 1s, Incinerate immunity is a must, as well as it's probably going to come with some dose of block damage. Otherwise, you need to push him to level 2s, perfectly dex them, and that's going to be slower. And offensively, obviously, big level 2 equals big nuke. So, in general, though, I think he has taken a step back. He has lost a lot of his defensive scariness because, there's a ton of champions that can do Bishop fight extremely well, extremely safe, and dexing his level 2 is less and less of an issue. At the same time, he's one of those champions that, ever so often, like right now, under the right set of nodes, is going to be a beast. It's also one of those champions that, under the right set of nodes, is a beast of not just defensively, but offensively. So I absolutely do not regret taking my Bishop to rank 3. He has put in a ton of work. I absolutely expect to be able to utilize Bishop again for different pieces of content. Be that, Battlegrounds, be that Lions War, be that somewhere else. At the same time, I cannot deny the fact that more often than before, he, for instance, isn't making the Battlegrounds deck. That, he isn't one of the go-to options for specific fights and so on and so forth. So I think he's a great champion that still is worth ranking up, definitely. It's just there are more and more mutants that I would take above him at this point. So there we go. That's what I think about Bishop. Moving on, I'm going to play Sunspot. And Sunspot's kind of similar thing. It is also worth noting that his initial explosion in popularity wasn't just because he was a crazy good Battlegrounds nuke. It was also because he had super high prestige. At, rank 2 level especially, and even at rank 3. Now his prestige isn't that impressive anymore with the new additions to the game, and his prestige is going to fall off further when we are going to move up the ranks. At the same time, you do see Sunspots fair amount, but it is a lot less. Again, more and more often, people do opt out of Sunspot, largely due to some of the newer matchups that are coming in the game. For instance, again, when you look at the champions that you have to be able to counter, then Sunspot just doesn't quite fit the bill as well anymore as he used to. Namely, for instance, you can't really use him against Onslaught. You can take a lot of Neuroshock damage. Against Bullseye, he doesn't do, this one of the dominant skill defender, as well as most other champions. Then Korg is always there, which has been kind of like a sore spot for Sunspot. Attuma, he isn't particularly great against Attuma either, or Killmonger, so he doesn't counter the biggest defensive threats of the class he's meant to counter the best, and that kind of shows. Overall, still a great champion that we do see plenty, but in my opinion, is still on a slide down as well, opposing to, many of the newer mutant additions. Definitely a valuable pickup. I was actually very late of getting a 7-star Sunspot myself, and I have, gotten him, taken him to rank 2, awakened him. I actually use Sunspot quite frequently now in Alliance Quest, and I like the champion. But, yeah, he is losing ground opposed to where he was previously, and is likely, possibly, going to slide even further down when we're going to get, mutant nukes that can do more, like Deadpool X-Force, for instance. With Sunspot, you typically go like level 1, level 2, and opponent's done. You can do that with Deadpool, but just about nothing is immune to Deadpool's damage. And Deadpool can do it faster because he doesn't have charge heavy attacks really and stuff. So you can already see what he was good for kind of being replaced by more current options that answer the questions that we are currently asking better than Sunspot. And this is probably where I'm going to get quite a lot of pushback. I think Havoc is better than Sunspot. I think Havoc deserves a spot up from before, and I think he is in spot number 6. And Havoc is also a curious case, a bit like Bishop, I just think a bit more efficiently as well. Because he's a dual threat champion that does a lot of matchups that you wouldn't think. He does, for instance, even more of the skill matchups you wouldn't think he would because of his non-contact attacks, for instance, against, Korg. He does that better. He does a Tuma better, where you can, do the entire fight with just about taking no damage from a Tuma, especially you go for level 3. He is better defender, in my opinion, than Sunspot and Bishop, because a lot of newer tech champions even don't really have that armor up to counter him. I think we're gonna see more of Havoc also in the few upcoming metas. I think actually mutants are gonna be treated very well in the upcoming meta, in between Bishop, Havoc, and Onslaught, and Mr. Sinister being dangerous champions to put shocks and incinerates on. And yeah, he has his cheesy factor against Onslaught, and he's one of the best Onslaught counters in general in game. He does quite a few matches that people wouldn't expect him to do well. He might not be the fastest at them, but basically, get level 3 with a couple of prowesses and a couple of feedback on the opponent, and, the fight's done. It is also evident to fully disclose the fact that, I personally love Bishop. I was one of the first people who kind of ranked 5 as 6-star Bishop and ascended him and started raving about him. And as soon as I got my 7th star, I effectively took him to rank 3 because I think he is a very underrated and understated character. A lot of his, throwaway abilities also seem to work in his favor extremely well. Recently, for instance, whenever a crit me with your best shot meta comes around, Havoc is a very hard opponent to fell because he reduces the critical damage by 50%. Not to mention, he places debuffs on opponent, which interacts with inequity very well. Not to mention that champions that crit a lot or put any energy dot on Havoc are going to be exploding, and there are increasing amounts of champions relying on Incinerate and Shock, and he's Incinerate immune, and if you do Shock Havoc, bad things will happen, as well as a whole bunch of attackers now more starting relying on stuff like Cold Snap, like Kate for instance, and that's not a great idea either. And yeah, then he has a fairly solid increase in energy resistance, again quite helpful, ability to access dot on his heavy attack with his feedback that is quite potent. And yeah, I just think he is one of those perpetual underdogs and underestimated champions in a game because he is not necessarily the fastest. But he has always had solid use in the game. Be that Alliance War, level 3, power back boosts, kill just about everything as soon as you reach those 3 bars of power. He has a ton of cheesy fights that I love doing with him in some occasions. For instance, eating, a level 1 from Iron Man Infinity War and just melting them, or, Onslaughts and a handful of other champions. So yeah, I do think he deserves to be here. I do think more people are realizing it, and we do see him around quite frequently, and he is becoming one of those kind of like common mainstay champions in the game that has aged absolutely wonderfully. Spot number 5, I'm gonna give Negasonic, and I kind of don't like doing this. I'm not the biggest fan of Negasonic. I do have her as 7-star. I'm taking her to rank 2. I'll probably end up taking her to rank 3. I do think she's very efficient on what she does, and that is obliterate everybody in the skill class. And then she's okay for, a bunch of other stuff against random champions. A lot of her power limit definitely has gone into being insane against skill champions. The opponents bleed, evade, true effect suffer, minus 100% ability accuracy. Additionally, precognition does not go on cooldown from evading counterattacks. So, she just takes every skill defender there is pretty much in the game. And again, she can be solid against some other champions. Love the fact that everything she does now is passive. So unlike a lot of other champions that rely on incinerates, those are passive incinerates. There is not a lot of those in the game as well. And she has a fairly simple rotation too. Drop that heavy attack, drop that level 2, just spam your level 1s, done, nothing too difficult there. She does have moderate defensive value, despite being very, very kind of squishy, in my opinion. And definitely benefits from being ranked up as high as possible. I don't like the design of the champion, as in like the theory behind it. Because she feels more like, let's throw all the abilities a mutant champion should have, rather than making her a champion with her own distinctive kind of kit. I think it's absolutely criminal that she's not incinerate immune herself, by the way. But yeah, I do think we are seeing a ton of her everywhere, be that story content, be that challenge modes, be that battlegrounds, be that Alliance War. So I do think she has kind of earned it. I was quite harsh on her after she got released due to her, like, relatively lackluster damage output, which, again, she's not the fastest. She's not the nukiest of nuki champions. That is absolutely given. And that is still her biggest weakness. I think she would be top 3, top 4 mutant for sure, and much higher on people's wish lists had they given her like 10-20% damage boost. I think that is just about everything that remains from her being really, really good. But okay. Well, I mean, I think she's still really, really good, but from being like absolute beast. Right. Besides that, this is the champion that caused me to give that big disclaimer at the beginning of the video. I saw that I previously played Dust in spot number 9, and I thought, yeah, Dust, has done well. She's solid. She's extremely underrated attacker, by the way. Very common, frequent defender. One of those that I hate because they switch off willpower. And initially I started saying, so where do I think Dust should lie? Because I, put in my top 3 that I was fairly certain of. And then I was like, I need to go from 4 to 10. And then I slotted in Dust in spot number 8. And I was like, okay. And then I looked at the rest of the champions, like, no, I don't think the champions that I would have to put above her deserve to be there. I was like, okay, I'm going to put her in spot number 6. I was like, I don't think Havoc has more value and is more present in the metagame than Dust, because he isn't. Dust is, much stronger defender, much more present in Alliance War and defense as well, and more commonly found in battlegrounds too, than Havoc is. It's like, so, okay, if I think Havoc has been doing good, and I definitely know that I don't want to put Havoc at the very bottom, or Bishop and so on and so forth, then Dust kind of works out in spot number 4. That is, in no small part because of her defensive prowess as well, which is definitely also, not an offensive dud. She's not a Korg type of champion where, you got defense and nothing on offense. She's definitely capable attacker, especially outside of battlegrounds, but also in battlegrounds she does have her uses. With her trip immunities, with, her glancing, her storm, her special spamming. It's not the best, but, she can put in work offensively. And then obviously defensively, she has a lot of going for her. Ironically enough, one of the things that she has going for her that I personally have recently started experiencing, for whatever reason, is this stupid lug, man. Like, if she ever is getting close to triggering that Sunstorm, my phone is about to break down. But even without that, she's one of those champions that you just really can't make a mistake against. If you kind of like miss, decks in the wrong time and end up taking a, hit on the block from a special attack and then accidentally hit her block, it's goodbye, Irene. You get that Sunstorm up and you take a ton of damage. And then on top of it all, obviously, she's disabling your willpower. So, any chip damage you take against her matters more because you can't willpower heal it back, really. And then on top of it all, she does have the bleed, poison, and shock effect immunity, which again, shock is quite popular for whatever reason in a ton of different classes right now. Even, in tech class. It means quite a few tech champions can't be as potent against her. For instance, Red Skull. You still can use Red Skull to down Dust, but you're going to have to spam level 1 and it's not going to be as fast. Obviously, a lot of skill champions lie in it. We have like Beta Build that has come out now in Cosmic class that relies on shock. So that immunity is stopping a lot of threats from multitude different classes. And again, bleed and poison immunity is, you know, always extremely good to have. Glancing is never fun either. So, yeah, and the fact kind of remains that we do see a lot of dust everywhere. There is an additional side note which might have affected my decision making here, but when we had the Sequitur and Provocateur Alliance War tactics, Dust was a champion that completely destroyed me with the garbage AI on path 4 when she's going unblockable. I hate that fight still. That fight, you know, was a very significant part of me ended up parting with the New Nation as well. So I do have a very healthy amount of hate and respect for Dust as a defender too. But ultimately, you can use a ton of champions against Dust if, you know, you play flawlessly enough. Still, this is also a reason why I don't think mutants are above Science or Mystic. Because I don't think Dust is that great in grand scheme of things. I don't think Dust is in the midst of conversation of, you know, top 20 champions in the game, for instance. I do think mutants is very, very strong class, but they do lack the depth of, you know, ultra powerful characters. It's kind of like in Science class, you know, when we would have to rank them, there would be like the Counter Fairies, the Photons, the Titanias, the Hulks, the Silks, the Spider-Hams. There's like a multitude of champions that all fit that really, really strong champion description. Dust isn't that level, I think. And she's the 4th best mutant, in my opinion. Or thereabouts. Or you could put like Negasonic in spot number 4. You can put Havoc in spot number 4. I don't think that kind of levels there. I don't think any of the champions so far, you know, maybe Deadpool X-Force will be that guy, maybe Gentle or Dazzler will be those champions, but I don't think that Weapon X or Bishop or Sunspot or Havoc or Negasonic or Dust deserves to be in the conversation of like top 15 best champions in the game, top 20 best champions in the game. And I think the I think the Mystic and Science classes have that depth over Mutant. I think there's a lot of very good mutants, like all of the ones that I discussed right now. But I do think they are a bit behind, you know, let's say top 5, top 6 of Mystic and Science class. So that's kind of the explanation here. And again, I completely would accept Dust at 6, for instance, or 7, and then Negasonic higher, and Havoc higher, or Sunspot higher. I do think it's ridiculously kind of close in between spots number 4 to 12. But spot number 3 is going to go Domino. Domino is just a staple, right? Domino, for a while, was a borderline forgotten champion aside from Alliance for Defense, and now she's just on every big account. And you know, that's how you know a champion has made it. You see Domino just about always in just about every big account, in just about every war, in just about every meta. There's going to be Domino in just about every big account. She's a staple of the game at this point. She is an absolute monster on a defense if opponent doesn't have the right counter. Without the right counter, she typically will go down quite quickly, but there are often chances that stuff can still go wrong thanks to her evade, for instance, or reduced stun duration, or, you know, some other mistake. And you kind of have to have her. And then offensively, obviously, she's still plenty capable. She's a competent bullseye counter, albeit not the best. She's competent at 2-man Killmonger counter, albeit not the best. Even though against Killmonger, she's often very ridiculous. Her only real big issue, which has always persisted, is that you can't really ever rely on her offensively. You know, the same fight might take 30 or 90 seconds, depending on how lucky or unlucky you get. I mean, I understand that is in the design of the character, but that's always kind of the big issue. Like, I have had fights that I won using Domino that I had no business winning. Like when she nukes down a Killmonger in like 35 seconds with 100% health. It's like, holy sh. And then I have had fights where I think I got this, where I think I have the better matchup, and I lose it because she takes 80 seconds to take down that fight instead of 30, and my opponent just, overtakes me. That is why I call her bipolar bimbo, because that's what she is. You never know what kind of Domino you're gonna get. She can do ridiculous things with ridiculous crits and crit bleeds, and she can also do barely any damage with that special attack. In general, though, obviously she has quite a lot of other stuff in her kit. When you synergize her up fully, she becomes a completely different beast. We have had quite a few nodes as well recently being used where heavy attack damage is enhanced, and that usually extends to those incinerates. There are a multitude of ways you can play her as well. In a couple of metas, I remember just about exclusively parrying Bullseye up until I got to level 2 and then being able to nuke him down. So she's quite a unique champion that I don't think Kabam has ever replicated in a similar way. The success, because she's genuinely the queen of random. You never know how the fight's gonna go with her on attack, and that's kind of scary but exciting at the same time. And she's an absolute menace on defense. And again, this is something that I much prefer to how Kabam's creating champions right now. But yeah, I think Domino is one number 3. Because ultimately there are more and more champions capable of taking Domino, also from other classes other than tech that don't really have abilities that can fail or have like massive energy resistances. And yeah, it is still quite very telling though that one of the baseline values of a tech champion that you check for today is whether that champion can, fight Domino. Right, anyways, moving on, spot number 2, that's Sinister. Realistically, that's where he should have been half a year ago as well. But I think Sinister's buff has been one of the best buffs in recent memory. I do think he's an absolute powerhouse of a monster. I do think he's extremely competent defender that can provide a lot of trouble. And I do think he's also extremely competent attacker that, can counter plenty of the top defenders in the game. He has quite unique playstyle, and he has also that, I would say, situational cheesiness. Now, one thing that I do want to talk when it comes to Mr. Sinister is the importance of the SIG ability, which is the main reason why I was hesitant to rank up a Mr. Sinister as a 7-star. And if I had a 7-star Mutant Awakening gem, I would have given it to Mr. Sinister without much thought. Because that Awakening ability is much, much better than people realize, and the high SIG too. And a good example here would be, for instance, when you roll on your Mystic ability. Getting like a 20% increase in combat power rate is already quite crazy, but when you stack it up to like 40 or 60, he becomes wildly more dangerous defender or significantly faster attacker. As well as landing on Cosmic, for instance, especially when you're on attack, getting that massive Fury, or 2 of these. Like, let's put in proportion, 7-star rank 3, for instance, that's 1900 Fury when his base attack is like 6500. So getting like a 50% Fury for Mr. Sinister is huge, because that will also increase all of his degen damage. He's very susceptible to attack modification, which is one of the reasons why Inequity is so effective against him. Mr. Sinister's damage is actually brutally good if Inequity is not involved. It's okay if Inequity exists. And if you can, boost his damage with a Fury buff, with boost, with recall masteries, his damage can go absolutely bonkers. As many of us saw and benefited from in Necropolis run. Also the fact that he can ramp up and, you know, get these benefits to every fight to significantly higher degree is crazy good. So on top of everything else, he's also a very, very good questing champion. And yeah, I think he's utterly successful buff, a staple of the game already. And it's been, you know, relatively recent time he has gotten his buff. And lastly, it's Onslaught. Now, again, for a while, I was a bit down on Onslaught because he was not necessarily the fastest, and everybody just about learned how to fight him and dex his level 1s and level 2s, and then we kind of started, you know, getting his AI under control, and obviously Kabam has been selling his counters as like he is one of the meta defenders. But despite all of that, facts are facts. And Onslaught's a beast. I would call him a top 3 champion in the game right now. Because he's one of those champions that works just about all the time. And, you know, we have a mighty charge meta where opponent purifies all debuffs, no problem, replace them with passives. We have a power shield meta, no problem, Onslaught, a lot of Onslaught damage, most of Onslaught's damage comes during special attacks from dot anyways. We're gonna have safeguard, no problem, cruises right through that. We have, you know, massive energy resistance and opponents take no energy damage. No problem. We're going to switch to degens on level 2 and nuke everything down anyways. And he just seemingly works always. And that is one of the hallmarks of a great champion. It really is. Still has a ton of defensive value because, you know, the neuro shocks do, you know, inflict you with the chip damage. If you mess up against him and accidentally parry or get parried, that immediately switches off your willpower, so that's going to be even more chip damage. Special attacks take forever, so often you'll end up wasting time dodging those, and so on and so forth. And despite people getting better at fighting him, he's not losing a shred of relevance. So he's fantastic. He really, really is. One of the better designed champions in quite a while, in my opinion. And even though, for instance, I hate that he also has that ability to switch off willpower effectively upon parry, I kind of don't mind as much as I do on like Photon, Dust, and a lot of other champions, because at the very least you can avoid it, you know. At the very least, if you don't make mistakes and don't accidentally parry or get parried, you can still keep your willpower. And yeah, other than that, fantastic champion. The only thing that I would love to change is increase the pause of his heavy attack to like 4 seconds if you are heavying stunned opponent. Because there's a huge discrepancy of the benefit there. And if you could do that, that would make him, you know, much smoother to play, I would say. If that, you know, the first line of this heavy attack would be pause those effects for 4 seconds instead of 1.5, I think he'd be a cherry of a champion. Because right now, being unable to land a heavy attack at right now can completely butcher your fight. That's the only note I would add to Onslaught as a champion. But here we go. The King of Mutants, as of right now. The successor to Apocalypse. Right. So let's do the quick summary, and then we're going to have to move on to science class. So, New Mutant top 10. Number 1, Onslaught. Number 2, Mr. Sinister. Number 3, Domino. Number 4, Dust. Number 5, Negasonic. Number 6, Havoc. Number 7, Sunspot. Number 8, Bishop. Number 9, Deadpool X-Force. Number 10, Weapon X and Dazzler. Now keep in mind again, as I am saying, I think spots number 4 up until spot number 12 or so are entirely negotiable. I am not, you know, set in stone. I would, you know, listen to arguments, and I would plausibly assume that, let's say, Sunspot should be number 4 and Dust should be number 6. I think that all checks out. I think they're incredibly close. On top of all of that, I do think that Deadpool X-Force and Dazzler both have dazzling future in front of them. I do think that both of them are going to be capable of rising the ranks in near future, and the real reason why I'm not placing them higher is just because I'm being cautious, because there's very little that they have done so far in the game. And on top of it all, obviously, Kitty Pryde, Archangel, Apocalypse, Toad are all noteworthy mutants that, you know, could potentially argue for a top 10 spot here as soon as they come out to 7 stars and we can actually see their impact in the game. This was a bit long one, so let me know what you guys think, and I should be back soon enough with the next top list. See you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about